Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Pete.
Oh, that escalated quickly.
Good.
Yay. We'll give people a couple of minutes to connect, and then I'll talk first about how the question and answer will work for the live attendees, and then a kind of a quick run through of what we're going to talk about during this live lesson, and then we'll get right into the live lesson. We should probably introduce ourselves. Yeah, I'm Janet Dawson, the physical yarn properties half of the pair. Some of you know me from Craftsy and other classes and conferences and things I've taught. Jen?
And I'm Tien Chu, and I'm the color and design half of this particular teaching pair. And some of you may have seen me in hand woven and shuttle, spindle, and dye pot, and of course I teach online as well. And I live in California, and Janet lives in the frozen north. Yeah. And so you'll see us teasing each other about that, or more to the point, you'll see me teasing Janet about that.
Yeah. She keeps sending me pictures of her garden.
My tomatoes are 4 feet tall.
We actually have green leaves on the trees now. Spring is considering springing, and it was hot here the other day, but that doesn't mean we won't get frost overnight in the next couple of weeks.
And this is Kate.
Oh, yeah.
Down there.
Hi, Kate.
I don't know if she's down there for other people, but I'm top right on my screen. Where are you, Tien?
I'm top right on my screen.
Oh, so if we do the high five thing, then I guess we have to go both directions.
All right. And Kate is our demo weaver. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm also in the frozen north. I know Janet is my yarn dealer, and so I am a longtime knitter and other fiber crafts type person, but relatively new weaver. And yeah, so I am learning how to do this stuff, and you get to watch me figure it out.
Our guinea pig. Okay, so we're up to about 350 people connected. So shall I just go ahead now, talk about how to do the Q&A? And
I think we should mention that Sandra is our moderator.
Oh, right, of course. Sorry, she's not on the screen. Sandra, say hi.
Hi, everybody.
That's Sandra, one of our studio elves, my chief studio elf. And yes, she's going to be working behind the scenes to keep the question and answer stuff organized, to keep me and Tien on point, and to help if people have technical issues. She's ready with the link to the Zoom help files. So that's what we got for you today. And occasionally you'll hear her possibly pop up and say, hey, you forgot, or whatever. So thank you very much to both Kate and Sandra for their help in pulling this together today. Alrighty, so the question and answer, for the format for the live lessons is that Tien and I will take turns working with Kate as she goes through the lessons in each chapter, and the one chapter of the week. And so you will see Kate and you'll see the teacher of the moment interacting about the lessons as we work through them. And during that time, the other teacher who's not in the hot seat will be taking that opportunity to respond to your questions and answers by text. There may be some questions that come up from you guys, from the attendees, that we do address live, spoken, but some of the questions will be answered just by text so that we don't interrupt the flow of Kate working through the lessons. Excuse me. The Q&A button, if you're on a laptop or a desktop, the Q&A button is at the bottom of your screen underneath Kate, her picture in the center. Yeah, where she just pointed. And you should just be able to move your mouse there and the Q&A thing will pop up and you can click on it and then type your questions in. it would be helpful if you could preface the question with either Tien or Janet, depending on who you're addressing it to, if that's relevant and appropriate. And again, the Q&A will be recorded so that the transcript of the Q&A will be available after the live lesson is over and posted into the into the classroom, the online classroom. Did I get everything about Q&A, guys? I think I did.
You did.
Okay.
You did.
So I am going to switch windows for a minute, which means I'm going to be staring off in a weird direction while I read to you the order of the plan for this particular lesson. I am going to start, Kate is going to start, Kate and I are going to start by going through the physical guidelines, physical yarn guidelines. And she's got her little mini stash that we put together in the virtual stash tour a week or two ago now. Oh my goodness, time is very strange these days. And then Kate is going to demo how to do the evaluate your yarns lesson. She's going to do those things there while you're watching so you can see how they work. And then Kate and Tien is going to talk about design principles, and then Kate is going to work through using the color mixer with Tien's help to come up with a combination of colors that she's going to use for her scarf. And then Kate and I will talk about figuring out a set. And as time allows, Kate and I will work through the calculators towards the end of the chapter for figuring out whether that 4-yard warp that we planned for her is going to work. And then the agenda says we pet the cat. So if you have your cats handy, get them ready towards the end. I like that part. Okay, coming back to the picture. There. So first up, that's me and Kate working through physical guidelines. So Kate, you want to show us which yarns you have settled for your kind of short list?
Okay. Give me a sec. This is my selection of yarns that has sort of shortened my short list.
Okay. So, and we should preface this by saying that in the virtual stash tour, which you can watch on Facebook, we intentionally just gave her no animal hair fibers. So we don't have to weed out any animal hair fibers. That's already been done. So do you want to tell us briefly what those yarns are, Kate?
Sure. The red one, which has got number 1 on it, is some kind of rayon slubby thing. I'm not really sure how big it is. The number 2 is a miscellaneous. It's got like a fleck in it and it's slightly metallic. Number 4 is a chenille. I think it's a cotton chenille. No, yes, I skipped 3. 3 is on top. 3 and 9 are the same tencel, just different colors. 5 is just a regular cotton, unmercerized cotton. 6 is a rayon. Was that what we established it was? We were going back and forth on that one.
Pretty sure it's the same as this guy, which is, I think, a rayon.
Okay. It's this guy. It's shiny and it's, and then number 7 is a rayon chenille. And number 8 and number 11 are both mercerized cottons. And number 10 is an 8-2 unmercerized cotton.
Okay. So, so you want to bring up the physical guidelines, and we'll just zip through those and confirm that those all work.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Oh, look, there you are.
There I are.
Let me go to the physical guidelines. There you go. So this is what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think everything's within the ranges because I don't think you guys gave me anything that was outside of them. So like, kind of skip that one. It's all weaving yarn, no animal hair fibers. It's all cottons and synthetics and stuff. I think there is enough of everything. There might be a couple where I have less than 3 ounces, but I have to measure them, weigh them again. But I think there's enough of everything, at least for, yeah.
And that 3 ounce, that is a number that I came up with based on best guesstimates of what people would be using. You can confirm whether that 3 ounce is what you really need when you get to the warp required calculator.
Okay, and that's what I was thinking, so I didn't worry about that part.
Yep.
My yarns are mostly fairly similar in size. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything too sticky and hairy. I don't have anything. The only one, I have one yarn that looks like it might be a bit wonky, and that's the Rayon Chenille. But other than that, everything else is, like, even when I washed it, is pretty stable, standard kind of stuff. And I do have at least a cut, like there is some variation in size, so it's not like all the exact same thing.
Yeah, and you've got the chenille, and you've got that rayon slub, which is going to be more of a challenge than just a predictable 8-2 cotton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So that's.
So then on to evaluating. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the 4 things we're going to look at are tensile strength, abrasion resistance. Washability and stretch is not a thing that's easy to do within the picture that we have available. So Kate has done that in advance. So you want to you can stop sharing and show us.
Okay.
Pick a yarn to choose to test for tensile. Is one of those yarns, does it seem the least strong? Maybe pick out one that is least strong.
Yeah. These 2, when I was washing them and stretching them, seemed to be the 2 that were the least strong, and this one's quite thin.
Yeah, so give that one a whirl.
So this was the one where I need to do like, how many strands do you want me to try?
I do a bunch. I mean, I always used to just do one, and then it occurred to me that the loom is never just pulling on one strand at a time, so that's not really that valid. So how many I do also depends on how limited the resource is. If I only have a little bit of the stuff, then I don't do as many. And I also try to, if it breaks, well, then you're not going to want to use it. But if it doesn't break and it's precious and I don't have very much, then I wind it back onto the spool.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's, this is like 5 or 6.
Yeah. Give that a whirl.
And that's a good distance of arms.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. It's not giving.
Okay. So if you did it at 5 and 6 and it broke, but it was hard to break, and you were really set on using that yarn, you could throw more in there and then try it like 8 or 9 or 10. And
okay.
If it's solid, then it's probably going to be okay, because you're going to have 100 or more threads in your warp.
Okay.
But if it just comes right apart, then.
Right. Because in the tour, you had that white, slubby, like really slubby boucle type thing that just kind of came apart in your hands.
It did. When I added 5 or 6 more of them, though, it had more strength. So an experienced weaver might be just fine using that and babying it along and not putting too much tension on the loom.
Okay. This one also did not break when I tried to break it. So the other one would probably be that cotton, that's the slubby rayon one.
That is actually the same one as in the video right in the lesson.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's why I didn't pick that one initially, because I think you'd already done that one.
Yeah. So
okay.
So that's tensile strength, then abrasion resistance.
Okay. So you also did the rayon slub for your abrasion stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If you haven't watched that little video yet, guys, it's right in the lesson. That's a hard word to say. Evaluating your yarns, and it did not fare well. So if Kate winds up using it, she'll have to be prepared for danger zones. So what's a different one that seems?
The chenille, I thought I would try and see what that does.
Sure, good plan.
I have this is my 10 dent one.
Okay.
And so like.
Is that a single, did you just pull an end through or did you pull a loop through?
Pulled an end through, I can pull a loop through.
Not the end of the world either way, but if you have additional things in there, then there's more opportunity for friction.
Yeah.
This is much easier to do when your reed is in the loom.
Yes, I suppose it would be.
Yeah, but just for those watching at home.
It doesn't have to look this weird.
The flapping reed is not part of the test.
Okay, so I don't know that anybody else can see it, but my reed is yellowy, chartreusey green in the spot where I was rubbing on it. But this stuff still doesn't look like I think I can, it like floofed it up a bit, but it didn't like remove all the floofs. And it doesn't look horrid.
That is exactly what I would expect from a rayon chenille. As long as it's kept under tension, chenille behaves pretty well. You have to make sure it always has tension on it though. So if anybody is using the rayon chenille at home and for some reason, especially if you've got it like in the floating selvage, or if the thread should break and you have to weight it off the back for a substitute, don't just let it hang freely with the weight on it, because it will twirl back there as threads do, and then that will untwist the binder thread in the center and the floofs will fall out.
Oh, okay.
So rayon chenille, it's important to anchor it in some way so a loose end can't
twist or
untwist. Yeah.
Okay.
And that again is why you need to twist the fringes if you have a chenille.
Does it do the same thing for cotton chenille or just rayon chenille?
No, chenille.
Any chenille. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want me to try, the Fleck was the only other one that it has some slubby bits in it. So I don't know if there's one close enough that I can find it to rub it, but that was the other one.
It is not, it's textured, but not textured enough that I think it's going to give you any grief. Okay. I'm talking about things like
okay.
That's a wool or a mohair loop, or that, excuse me,
that's
ball that is not very plied.
Okay, I think pretty much everything I narrowed down to is really tightly plied.
Yeah. Okay. I think I hope people feel like we've shown them enough of that, and I don't want to take up too much time. So let's go on. Do you want to show us your butter? Well, oh, I guess stretch is next, isn't it?
Yes. Why don't I do this guy?
And you've got the numbers from having previously stretched.
I didn't. There were two of them I didn't do because I didn't know whether you wanted me to show the stretch or whether that was too like awkward to do in this amount of space.
Do you think it would be easy to measure out 5 yards and then I'm going to say let's not do that, because I think it's pretty clear in the video. And then if there's time at the end of this hour to come back and do it, great. But I think there are more important things to spend our time on. If you've got some example number, or if you could just tell us kind of what the range was.
Okay, yeah.
Do mostly the same things, or?
Yeah, they were all within a couple of inches in terms of the difference. Like, I think the least amount of like, I don't know, pop back was 1 inch, and the most was 5 inches. So they're all first few that I did, because I was getting used to how I was going to hold it when I was wrapping it, and because I used a meter stick, which of course isn't even fully is longer than a yard, so I had to
Right, those are all pretty close together. This stretch thing is kind of a new animal, so I don't have a number to say. As long as they're within this many inches or whatever, that they'll work. But a range of 3 inches to 5 inches seems manageable, whereas in the video examples, my range was 3 inches and 9 inches. That's way more significant.
Yeah.
Okay, so then your little butterflies.
You want to see? I don't think I had a picture of my butterflies, so I just have my butterflies. So that's the gold tencel. This was the guy who fared the worst when I washed him. This is the Rayon chenille.
It doesn't look real great.
That's that pale gold. We're calling it Rayon. There is the 8-2 yellow.
Mm-hmm.
This is 8-4? Is that right?
Yeah.
Of the teal cotton. The blue tencel, and the purple and green. This is 6-2, I think.
Yep.
And then my friend, the gray slate slubby blue guy.
Did any of them discharge dye in the hot water?
I did them all together, and it got a little bit darker. So okay. I think it was, if anything, it was probably this blue, because that was sort of the type of dark it got, but there may have been a little bit from the purple, but for the most part, no. And none of them picked up anything from the water, and it was like the water was like swimming pool blue. Like it wasn't, the water was actually too colored. It was just when I was done with it, it wasn't clear anymore.
Yeah, so that doesn't seem like an unworkable, an untenable amount of dye to come out. It's not unusual to have some dye discharge. Especially from a weaving yarn as opposed to, say, a knitting yarn, because knitting yarns have been more processed before you use them than a weaving yarn has.
Okay.
And if they're not transferring to the others, then it doesn't really matter if stuff comes out. Except you do need to make a note that if a lot of dye comes out, even if it doesn't transfer, you don't want to wash that thing with something else that it might transfer to.
Okay.
But chances are, you're probably going to be washing, unless your scarf is like all cotton, you're probably going to be washing it by hand in a sink and not throwing it in the washing machine with your white t-shirts. So, yeah. Okay, so it was kind of hard to see them, but it looked like most of those did not really change very much at all in the washing, except for maybe the chenille.
The chenille was the only one that really changed. Like the cottons poofed up a bit and got a little twisty on like the ends of the butterflies.
Yeah.
And I think this guy bloomed a bit, but not significantly. But really, the chenille went kind of bleh.
Right. So again, like we were saying before with the broken ends or the floating selvages, chenille needs to be protected in the fringe so that the wet finishing doesn't make it go bleh like that.
Okay. So then in process, then it would be cut it, twist it, then wash it, rather than washing it and then finishing the ends after.
Yes, exactly. Twist your fringes before you wet finish the fabric. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And if for some reason you are not going to twist the fringes, which I don't recommend for a chenille regardless, but the example I have has the chenille in it. But like if for some other reason you want to leave your fringes loose, but you kind of want to protect them in the wet finishing, because that might be more vigorous than laundering down the line. What I do in that case is at the end of each section, just a chunk of fringe. I don't worry about measuring out how many ends are in there. Beyond the length I want my fringe to actually be, I put an overhand knot. So now these can't unply, they're fixed at both ends. And then I would eventually use my rotary cutter and cut them all off even, cut all those knots off even. And that will make this be a little more protected, a little more organized. It won't last forever, but at least we'll start off more nicely.
Okay.
Okay. So that's all the testing, I believe. And the physical guidelines. So I think you're on to color and to Tien now.
I think so.
Okay, Tien, take it away and I will look at questions.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about color first. And so I'm going to share my screen, and then Kate's going to walk through designing her things with the color mixer. So there were 3 color principles in this week's lesson, and I'm just going to go through them quickly. So I am going to maximize my screen, and then I'm going to share my screen, if I can find the share button. Hold on a minute. Share screen, and I think I want to share this. There we go. All right. So there were 3 things in this week's lesson. One was how to make the pattern show clearly. One was how to pay attention to the warp rather than the weft. And the third was to how to avoid the dreaded mud. And so the first thing was how to make your pattern show. And so I've done up a thing here with the 4-shaft draft number 1. And here's the warp colors, here's the weft colors. I'm going to zoom in a little bit by increasing the pattern size. And this, here we've got a fairly light warp, and we've got a fairly dark weft. And so if I change the weft color to really dark black, you can see that the pattern shows up really clearly. If you change the warp color to a medium color, you can see that the pattern pretty much disappears, and it doesn't matter that much if I change it to something that's like middle of the road. Then the pattern starts to disappear, like if I put it out here. Now it's harder to see the pattern. And that's basically because like here, you basically can't see it at all. And that's because you need black and white contrast in order to see the pattern. So that's the first thing that I wanted to show. The second thing that I wanted to show was that the, let me see, the second thing was to show the warp versus the weft. So if you want the warp to show more, then you want to choose a weft that is both darker and duller. So in this one here, you're seeing a lot of the warp. If I were to make the warp, but you're not seeing the weft so much. If I were to make the weft super bright and light as well, if I were to make it yellow, now all of a sudden the yellow is dominating. And that's because yellow is a very light and very bright color, and that attracts attention a lot more than it would if it were a dark or dull color. So if I made it this dull gray, then the warp would come forward. And then the last thing is about avoiding the dreaded mud. Basically, I picked the warp colors to all come out of this section of the color wheel. And that's going to produce a fairly bright effect if I stick with this section of the color wheel. If I then go and pick something on the opposite side of the color wheel, like a green, then all of a sudden I start getting a much duller color, especially if I'm using small yarns. So if I'm using small yarns, then this turns to a very dull color. If I were to pick something from the from this side of the color wheel, the color stays bright. And that's because I'm staying within that same segment of the color wheel, like I said in the earlier lesson. Or if I stayed in this segment of the color wheel or this segment of the color wheel, or even if I stayed like in a small range here, I would be okay, or a small range here, I'd be okay. But the one thing you don't want to do is go with greens against oranges, because those segments here are going to be problematic. So that's sort of the very short version. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go to Kate, who's going to demo picking yarns with her yarns.
Okay. So do you want me to go right to the color mixer?
Yep, and load up your yarns. Share your screen.
I'm just gonna. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Ooh, why did, nope, I don't want to Pinterest that. Okay, so I'm gonna do, so there's my colors, like my yarns, and I'm gonna make this bigger, I think, just to, be able to see more downstairs. Okay. And I got to go over here to find everybody. Okay, so I'm gonna turn that one, that guy. Okay, and then this one, I want to do. So this one I found really didn't work here. So it's okay if I go up here and just sort of make that color.
That's right.
Okay. This is,
and this works. This is especially important for shiny yarns, which often are hard to figure out.
it's like a yellow.
Yours is yellow green, so yeah.
And
There.
then like
Maybe a little duller.
like that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Did it? Okay.
There you go.
And then this one.
One thing is that if you're having trouble getting a photo that captures your yarn correctly, is to take the photo in indirect natural light. Like this one looks like it was taken from near a window, and that's just about perfect.
Yeah. That guy might not be quite as bright, might not be quite as green as it actually is. Give me a sec. Yeah, I think it's a little more like that.
Okay.
But it didn't do it. So, now I gotta, sorry, I gotta go back up here and do it again. There we go. No. Like, maybe there. Maybe there. Okay, that's better. And then I gotta change the pink to use everybody. There. Oh, I was thinking maybe this guy somewhere. I was trying to stay in those blues and greens. And then this one. These three colors in the middle have all been kind of like telling me they want to play, but I don't know whether they really will, because that's, and I think this is purple is actually a little pinker than that. So let me see if I can do. Is that right? No, it's still dark. It's just a little redder. There, try that. Did that work? It did not. There. So
Okay.
that's that
Kind
one.
of the idea.
Okay.
How's that looking?
It looks good. I wanted to try it with the green and the dark blue though too, because I think that's because the blue is the same groupy thing as the rest of it.
Yes.
And then there's this. No, that's a little there. That's a little closer.
You can see how much brighter it is.
Yeah.
When they're all from the same color family, which does not mean that you have to do it all from the same color family. You'll get a more lively result if you pick something that's from a radically different color family. It doesn't look like you've got something that's too radically different.
No.
Try just use the color picker and try something that's completely different, like magenta or something.
I do have a yarn that's a hot pink, so
try that.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is that you want to look at it so you can see how that, then zoom out, because one of the classic mistakes is to look at things only close up, and you also want to see what it's going to look like from further away.
Okay.
And you can see, and the reason you want to look at it from further away is that that's how the actual piece is going to be seen. And I should actually change this to let you zoom out even further. That's what it's going to look like from a couple of feet away.
Okay.
And that's, and that's how people will actually see it. So you don't want to look at it just from really close up.
Okay. Close up help with grabbing things, but it looks kind of cool with the yellow, but I don't think I have the yellow like that.
Yeah, the only thing about that yellow is that it's going to dominate the piece,
Yeah.
so you're not going to see your warp colors as much.
Yeah. What about using a color that's in the warp and the weft? Like
that will tend to obscure your pattern.
Okay.
But do it and see.
Okay, like guy, I guess. Is he close? I think I'm...
So, you know, where the two colors cross each other, you'll tend to lose the pattern.
Okay. Yeah, that would go.
See?
Yeah, that goes
What's
away.
happening is that you're losing the black and white contrast that you need for the pattern to show.
Okay. So that. And then trying to so this is a metallic-y color, which isn't photographing well.
Right, so for that you'll need the manual color picker.
But even when I was going through the manual color picker, I found it really hard to do. Do you have suggested?
Sparkle yarns are really, really hard to simulate, and that's where, you know, physical samples just come into play.
Okay.
There's only so much you can do with light on the screen.
Trying to, maybe that one. Yeah.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with light on the screen, unfortunately.
Okay.
The idea of the color picker is really to give you an idea of how the colors are going to look. It's not going to be perfect.
Okay. Is there something in, because I want to try seeing what happens if I change this guy to this one. Oh.
So when you start mixing up light and dark colors in the warp, then that's usually bad news for your pattern.
Okay.
And that's because you start losing the light-dark contrast that you between warp and weft. If you have a wide range of values, that is to say, a wide range from light to dark in your warp, then you start losing that light-dark contrast that you need between the pattern.
Okay.
To see the pattern. But it's a good question.
What did I do? There we go. I'm trying to make that yellow a bit brighter because that yellow is in fact brighter. More of a sunny orange yellow.
The manual color picker is really helpful because no photo is ever going to completely capture all the colors in your piece.
And that's what. So this one is with the warp and the weft the same.
Yes.
Okay.
And let me just look quickly at the questions. A bunch of people have been asking about variegated yarns, and variegated yarns, the color mixer is just not set up to do variegated yarns. And variegated yarns can be problematic because if they vary too much in value, which is to say light dark, they can make hash out of your pattern, because to get a good clear pattern, you need light dark contrast. And so if your variegated yarn goes from very light to very dark, then it's going to create a pattern of its own, and then that makes hash out of the woven pattern.
Okay.
So
with something like this, so like I've got this particular arrangement of colors based on the way, I guess, the shape of the woven pattern. Is there a better or worse arrangement of the warp colors?
We'll get into that next week.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's probably better just to get into that next week.
Okay. Okay. So right now, this is more about
This is more about picking colors that will make the pattern show, and about avoiding mud.
Okay. Okay. So it's not about establishing the final draft.
It's not about establishing the final draft. This is about just making sure that the colors are compatible.
Okay. Okay. And then with these, I can right-click on them, copy them, and paste them somewhere to save them.
You can right-click on the draft and then just save it. Oh, the other thing is that if the draft gets too big, you can also use the scroll bar down at the bottom of the screen to move it around. So you zoom into size 12.
Yeah.
You can move things back and forth.
Yeah, I did.
No, up top.
Further up. There we go.
If you zoom into size 12, then you can't change the weft size unless you move the scroll bar.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So that's basically it.
Okay. And now, if I had another color that I had decided I wanted to play with, if I change the picture, is it going to get rid of everything I already did?
No, it won't. So you can also, this is handy if you want to buy a yarn. So you can grab a screenshot of the vendor's color palette and just upload that screenshot, and then just click on the yarns in that screenshot. Okay. Or grab a screenshot of the yarn that you're thinking of using and upload that. So you pick your colors from your stash yarn, you upload the new photo, and then you pick your color out of that new photo.
Okay.
So
I can
cool.
Continue.
Yeah. Or you can share your screen. Stop sharing your screen. Oh. Now you're okay.
Sorry. There we go.
Janet, you're up.
You're on mute, Janet.
Yes, I realized. And Zoom is smart enough to put a big thing up that says you are muted. It doesn't say dummy, but I Okay, so I've been typing madly. So we're to determining set now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, did you decide on some yarns?
I think so.
Yay, show me which ones. I'm sorry. I was typing so madly that I wasn't paying attention.
I'm going to use the chenille, the gray slubby stuff, that light rayon, the thicker cotton, and the dark tencel is weft.
Cool. Okay. So, did you look up? No. Have you looked up? Do you know what the twill sets for those 4 warp yarns are?
I think I have notes.
Okay.
So I think I know what they are.
We should maybe show people how to find them in the yarn chart, though, huh?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can. Do you want me to share my share my screen?
Share your screen.
Okay. Share my. Okay.
Alrighty.
So this is where the master yarn chart.
Yep.
And then click on the master chart. So I have some of these things I kind of knew what they were. Like there's an 8/4, which I think is down here is that at the bottom of the page?
8/4 soft twist cotton. I see your mouse is pointing almost directly at it. Yeah.
Great. So,
okay.
So that one I have. Why don't I have? I didn't write that.
And the suggested set for twill is the largest of the 3 numbers at the end of the listing.
Right.
And that for the 8/4 cotton is
18.
Okay. Now, if you search for, and you can usually on most computers, Control F will let you search, or then you can just type rayon chenille.
Except okay. So the rayon chenille and the cotton chenille, will they be different? Because I know the cotton chenille's right here. Okay.
No, they'll be different because the fiber, the rayon, well, they may be different. Don't assume that they will be the same because rayon is more slippery than cotton and has less grip.
Chartreuse is, so it's 12, 15, and 18 because I think we agreed that was probably the.
Yeah.
So with this, okay, those 2 are done. Put them over there. Now these 2 are fairly similar, but where they're different fibers, am I gonna, like, I don't know what one of them is a tencel,
You can look for 8/2 tencel.
Okay. Oh, there it is. No,
that's
18/2.
Do you see? It's got a 1. There you go.
8/2. So that one's the 10/2 tencel is 16, 20, 24. And then this 8/2, it's just an 8/2 rayon. What I should look for that one?
Is that the creamy one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Or see the one above it? Do you see? So the one that you have highlighted right now says 3360 yards per pound, 8/2. That, didn't we decide? Well, when we get back to your screen, we'll look at whether they are, whether that one is the same size as an 8/2 or a little bit finer. So write down the one that's highlighted currently, which says 24, and that one above it, the rayon flake, because see, 3,700 yards per pound is slightly finer.
Okay.
3,360 yards per pound.
Okay.
All right.
And then this stuff that I don't know what it is, how do I look it up?
Well, if you have an idea of the weight or the fiber, you can poke around for something that looks similar. But let's assume that you don't, and we'll talk about it. But back in your window.
Back in my window. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want me to just stop sharing or go back to the...
Yeah, come back to you for a minute because I want... Okay, so I am going to demonstrate with some stuff I have handy.
Okay.
Handy. Look. Okay. This is an 8-2 unmercerized cotton, and this is, I think, the same thing as what you have in the cream.
Okay.
But you're going to need to do this test yourself because I'm not positive that this is the same as what you've got.
Okay.
So if you take an end of one and loop it around the end of the other so they are crisscrossed, can you see?
Like that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then twirl them so they kind of ply.
Oh, okay.
You should be able to get a sense of whether say the left half is thicker or skinnier than the right.
I think this one is skinnier.
Okay, so it's probably that 3,700 rather than the 3,360.
Okay.
But again, so I would like circle the 28 rather than 24, but keep in mind that those are two options, and you can put them both into the calculator to see what impact that has.
Okay.
Okay. Now that other one that is like an 8-2 cotton, we think, size, even though not in fiber content, but a little bit more texture, do the twirly thing with that.
Okay. It's definitely bigger.
Okay. So the 8-2 unmercerized cotton recommended 18, didn't it? No, sorry. 8-2 unmercerized cotton. What was the set for that one?
We didn't look up that one because that wasn't with the yarns, but I have it written down.
Of course.
It's 24.
It's 24, yeah. So that one, it's a little bit heavier than your cotton.
Okay.
And, it's not really slippery or slinky. It's not more slinky than the 8-2 cotton. It's got a little more texture to it, but that's adding up to it being heavier. So instead of 24, I might say 22.
Okay.
Or 20. Give it just a little bit more space.
A little bit more range. So what is there like a rule of thumb for how far away from the base that you would go?
It is kind of a little intuitive thing going on, but it's based on how different it is from the thing that you're comparing it to. So that one's only slightly heavier, and the heavierness might be from the texture. So if it was slightly heavier and also kind of hairy, well then I might go a step for the heavier and then another step for the hairy.
Okay. So I'm gonna put that was the slate one. I'm gonna put 22.
Yeah, give or take.
And then like 20 as an option.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so you've got now your sets for all 4 component yarns, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the set calculator.
Okay. And just a second. I'm sorry, the bar's at the top and is in my way. This is the one. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so move that slider around, or you can use the arrow bars or arrow keys on your keyboard to put them to the 4 sets that you came up with.
So that's 22 for the one. The chartreuse is 18.
And all this does, while you're moving the sliders, all this does is average the 4. There's no mystery here. It's just add the 4 numbers up and divide by 4. I think it's handy to have a slider like this because then you can see what happens to the average at the bottom as the slider moves around.
So that's because the slate is the 22 at the top. Okay. The chartreuse is 18. that light pale goldy stuff is 28, and then the teal is also 18.
Okay, and the average at the bottom is 21.5.
Okay.
So if you had a 21.5 read, you could use that, but chances are you do not.
No.
I have an 11 dent read, so I might just say, okay, 22, done, dusted. Except you have to consider if you have something like a highly textured yarn like that yellow boucle that I held up earlier, it might not be at all happy in, say we were going to go with 24, for instance. Then my logical choice would be a 12 dent read. But that textured yarn probably wouldn't be at all happy in a 12 dent read because the size of the dent is much smaller than the yarn. The average might come out to 24 because it's been combined with really skinny things, but the fat yarn still has to fit.
Right.
So I would be inclined to use an 8 dent read, 3 threads each in an 8 dent read, which would give me 24. Or if I had a really super textured one, a 6 dent read and 4 threads per inch to give me 24. Not per inch, per dent.
Per dent. Okay.
But so based on what reeds you have available and the thickness of your yarns, you can kind of fiddle these sets around. So
okay.
Your original suggestion is 21.5. What happens if you choose the bottom range of that, of some of the ones where you had kind of a range to choose from?
Okay, so if I go 24 with this one, and I go 20 with the one at the top.
So 20 ends per inch. So your range is not very wide. You had 21.5 before, you have 20 now. So the 20 EPI or 22 EPI is probably, either one of those is a good place to start.
Okay, so where I have an 8, a 10, and a 12 dent, from an ease perspective, 2 and the 10 and doing 20 EPI is probably going to be the easiest place to start.
Yep.
Does it make sense to start from the easiest or from something that if I needed to change anything was already the easiest to manipulate?
You tested, the only one of your 4 that you had any concerns about possibly abrasion issues with was the rayon chenille, correct? And you tested that one in the 10 and it seemed fine. So yeah. I think your 10 is good.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you really, if you're waffling between a couple of choices, err on the side of bigger dents.
Okay.
All right, so scroll down a little bit and we'll look at adjusting the baseline set.
Okay, and so this one, the 2 things that I was thinking when I first read through this were the chenille and the fact that this guy is thinner, my weft stuff.
We can't see you, Kate, so you have to tell us which guy you're holding up.
Sorry, I'm waving it around and no one can see me. The weft, the blue tencel that I want to use for the weft.
Oh yeah.
One of the finer yarns in the, it's second finest to that that gold stuff. So those were the 2 things I wasn't sure of in terms of impact to my set choices.
Okay. Did you look up the suggested set for your weft choice?
Yes, my tencel is 24 is what it's recommended for.
Okay, so that's a little closer than your average set for your warp.
Yes.
Which means you could bring the warp together a little bit more, okay. So that the tencel does not just beat down and cover everything.
Okay.
And because you have the rayon chenille, you could bring it together a little bit more, and that will keep the chenille from worming. Because the rest of your, let me think, one of your yarns is kind of textured. That will help to hold the possibly acrylic-y or the unknown slate one has some grip to it. That will help the chenille from worming and just wiggling away on you. But the other ones, the tencel and stuff, are not going to help lock it into place. So you were looking at that range of 20 to 21.5, maybe 22. Given the fact that your weft is finer and you've got slippery yarns, you might want to go the 22 side instead of the 20 side.
Okay. With something like that, would there ever be a point where it would make more sense to go all the way up to 24?
Yes. And my rule of thumb in a scarf is to err on the side of the warp being too close together. You can close this window now for a bit. It's to err on the set being too close, well, closer together rather than more open, because if it's closer than is ideal, the weft won't pack in as much, and that's just fine. You'll still get a pretty decent, nice drape, and it will show off the colors in your warp even better. It may obscure the twill design some, but that's not the end of the world. If your set is too open, then your weft can just pack right down onto it. We've all seen the pictures on Facebook groups or online where the warp for a project just disappears and all you see is the weft.
Yeah.
And those fabrics are stiff. So they might be great for a placemat or something, or a sewing, but they're not going to be comfortable to wear around your neck.
Okay.
So I would err on the side of too close together rather than too far apart.
So if I was thinking that with the really thin piece that's in there and my really thin warp, or weft, that I wanted to go to 24, would it make more sense to drop down to my 8?
Yeah.
Or just to test the abrasion on my 12?
Yes, you could do either of those things.
Okay.
If you tested the abrasion in your 12 and it seemed fine, then the 12 would be easier to thread because the threading itself is all in repeats of even numbers. So it'll be easier to just grab 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, rather than 3, 3, 3, 3, which will interrupt. It means that the V's, the peaks and valleys of the rose path threading will not line up with the dents.
Okay.
But threading and slaying only takes a couple of minutes, and weaving goes on for much longer, and it affects the integrity of the cloth if the yarns are crammed too tightly in there. So it's kind of a best guess. Neither one's a bad plan if your threads will move freely through the reed. It's just comes down to that.
Okay, but theoretically 8 is safer
if you have textured yarns. If you don't have textured yarns and your yarns are fine
the one that works. Okay.
Use a smaller one, because then you'll have less reed marks.
Okay.
Although reed marks don't show up much in a mixed warp anyway.
Okay.
Okay, so you have a fairly good idea of, we've decided, I think, that anything from 20 to 24 will probably work.
Yes.
Okay. So then, how's the time? We're getting close to the end of the hour. Are we 1 hour or are we an hour and a half? Should we keep going?
I don't see any reason not to keep going if you want to keep going.
Okay, good.
Back to the calculator?
Yeah, the warp required calculator.
So, oop. Oop. There we go.
Alrighty.
So these bits at the beginning, you probably know the math for my loom better than I do.
Yeah.
so I wouldn't know what else to put in here.
Let's just look at them one at a time, because other people at home have different looms.
Okay.
So Kate's loom is a Mighty Wolf, FYI. What these are, so the first one is the length for tying the knots onto the front. If you don't tie on, if you lash on, then you probably have less length there, less length required. But you still need to allow yourself enough for no, you don't need fringe. If you're sampling, you don't need to worry about fringe.
Okay.
So, the one thing though, if you have a mixed warp, especially if there's some variety in stretch, when you get to the whole warp beamed on, it's not unusual for some of the yarns to be a few inches shorter than other yarns because tension has been applied as you were beaming.
Okay.
So you don't want to be skimpy here because you might have to cut off a couple of inches of the longer ones to even them up with the shorter ones.
Okay. Okay.
Then we gave you guys 20 inches for sampling. And in my mind, that's 18 inches to weave the samples plus a little bit of space after the sample because you're going to want to hem stitch it and leave a little bit of a fringe. You don't just cut right at the edge of the sample because then you can't wash it.
Okay.
So that's where that 20 inches came from. If you like to sample and you have lots of material available, if you don't have a limited amount of the yarns you're using, then you can add more than 20 inches there.
Okay.
If you have very limited amounts of the warp yarns and your heart is set on using those warp yarns, you might not want to sample for even, you might cut that down to only a 6-inch sample. Or if you're feeling particularly risk not adverse, you could not sample. But then you won't have an opportunity to try and make sure that you're happy with your set and your weft choice.
Okay. So with the yarns that I have that I wanted to use in weft, 2 are full cones. And then the other 2 are both over, one is 4.2 and the other is 3.8 ounces.
Okay.
So I think I have enough to allow me to do the sampling.
Okay. And the estimated 3 ounces, that did include all this length for sampling.
Okay.
So we'll be able to confirm that you have enough in the next step.
Okay. Okay.
Alrighty. So then the assumption is you'll weave an 18-inch sample and then you'll secure it in some fashion and then you'll cut it off in front of the reed so that you don't have to reslay unless you want to change your set. And then you have to tie the thing back on. So there's another 10 inches right there for that.
Okay.
Again, if you lash on instead of tying on, you may have less loom waist at the front. So you need to moderate that by how long you want your fringe to be. And you don't have to worry so much about the extra impact of the stretchiness because at this point you've cut off everything even anyway.
Okay.
All right. So then next we get to woven length of scarf in inches. This is not the finished length of your scarf. We can't tell you anything much about the finished length of your scarf because we don't know exactly what you're using and how much it's going to shrink and
all that good stuff.
Tie up you're going to use and blah, blah, blah. So this is the amount that you're going to weave. And I measure it under weaving tension on the loom. But different people have different approaches to that.
Okay.
And chances are, with the fibers that you've chosen, Kate, which are synthetic and cellulose, you won't have too much dimensional loss warp-wise.
Okay.
So your scarf, if you wove at 76, will probably be 70 finished.
Okay.
If you wanted to make it much longer, in particular, if you had tons of materials, and so instead of a 10-inch wide scarf, you decided you were going to make an 18-inch wide shawl, then you might want to make it quite a bit longer than 76, so that it's not just a square you're trying to wrap around your shoulders.
Okay.
Then finally, loom waist at the back of the loom. That is generous too, because if you have a mixed warp, and in particular, if you have a warp that you've wound with the threads in one order and then decided you're going to thread them in a different order, which might happen based on the decisions you make next week in the color patterning lessons, things can get kind of crossed back there. And so it's a good idea to err on the side of a little bit extra loom waist. But if you know that you only typically need 10 inches of loom waist at the back, you might be fine with 16 or 18 or 20 or whatever. So that's one to change based on experience if you have experience. And if you don't, then the 24 is a place to.
Okay. And I don't know, which is why I said you probably have a better idea how much loom waist is possible in my loom than I.
So do you want to make a much longer scarf?
I don't.
Jen and I were talking about what size scarf people were going to make, and we clearly have different points of view because she's living in the tropics of California, where people put a scarf around their neck because it's pretty, not because it's warm.
We had an absolutely hilarious conversation about that where Janet said a scarf should be, what, 72 inches long? And I said, why on earth would you want a 72-inch long scarf? What the heck would you do with that?
You prevent
I think
your nose.
I pointed the camera outside the window where it was like snowing vigorously at this time in March and said, that is what I would do.
I said, it gets cold? You would put a scarf around your neck because it's cold?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to, when we come back to speaker view, I haven't actually measured this thing. Oh, I have measured it, not since I washed it. But I like to wear my scarves folded and wrapped around my neck and then kind of twisted together. And you need extra length for that.
Right.
Right.
No, I think 70 to whatever else might shrink in there is probably okay.
Yeah.
Especially because I have no idea whether it's going to be the greatest scarf I've ever seen or whether it's going to be an experiment that I might give to my grandmother because she'll think everything I give her is great.
Oh, aren't grandmothers wonderful? Like that. So if you don't change anything, the total length is 140 inches, which is 3.9 basically yards. So I just rounded up to 4.
Okay.
Because that's how warping boards work.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking was when all was said and done, it was just like, well, 4 yards.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
So next.
So then on to the next one.
Okay.
So length of warp in yards, 4. There it is. You can change it if you want to. So here now, width of your warp in inches. If you had lots of all of your yarns, then you could certainly entertain the idea of making your scarf a lot wider than 10. But we're not sure about that one that you only have 3 ounces or so of. So let's leave it at 10 for the moment.
Okay.
Now you're set.
So I'm thinking I might go with the 24 just with those pieces.
Okay.
And
we can look at the impact of changing those in a little bit.
Okay.
But if you don't, then the total amount of warp that you need is 960 yards. And because that's going to be split evenly between 4 colors, you need 240 yards of each one. Now,
Okay.
I just want to insert here, I've seen lots of beautiful pictures appearing in the Facebook group in particular of people playing with color placements. And not a lot of people are, well, those people who are not using the color mixer, but who are designing it in their own weaving software, are not necessarily using the colors in the same ratio. So if your ratio is different than 1 thread of each color evenly mixed across, then this warp required per color may not be valid for you. So
okay.
there you
Okay.
go.
Okay.
So that one, that 8-2 rayon, that's the, no, which is the one that we're not sure you have enough of?
It's the 8-4 teal cotton is the one that I have the smallest amount of.
Okay. So what you need to know is the yards per pound of that cotton.
Okay. So
I can tell you what it is, but let's go find it in the master yarn chart.
Okay. So 8-4. Yeah. It's not the cotton warp. It's not.
It is not carpet warp.
Down.
It's the one just below it.
It's this one. Okay. So they're the same weight though.
They are. And
Okay.
that's those numbers 8/4 are equivalent to telling you the yards per pound if you know how to crunch them.
Okay. So they're 1680.
Yep.
0.
So there you go. You need only 2.3 ounces of that yarn, and you have 3.8.
So
Okay.
even with the core, even though I don't know how much the core weighs, but there's still enough variance there that should be fine.
Oh yeah. So let's assume for the moment that you had measured it without a core, and if you have an empty core, you can
Right.
measure the empty core and then subtract that from your 3.8. to know how much your actual yarn weighs. So scooch up a little bit to width of warp. Can you move the screen so that you can see both the width of warp slider and the how much you need? There, perfect. So move that width and warp thing up. Keep going, keep going. Okay, go back down. So, and I'm looking at the ounces of yarn required. So there, that's just under 3.8. So you could, in theory, have enough yarn to do a warp that's 16.5 inches wide.
Okay.
24 ends per inch.
24 ends per inch.
Yeah.
So if I drop that down to 20, I could make it wider.
Yep.
Or I could, right. Okay.
Yeah. Now,
So,
I would not plan to use up every last scrap of your warp because you want to have a backup plan if you have a broken warp thread or something.
right.
But this will tell you the maximum that you can get away with the warp materials you have on hand.
Okay. So the other one I don't have a full cone of is that gold rayon one.
Okay.
So I can go in there. Whoops, I stopped sharing, sorry.
There was something I was going to show you when we came back to, nope, but we're not. Shoot, what was it? We said 8-2 rayon. It was this one, right? The 1700, the 3700. Yeah.
Wanted to go
Yes.
With
okay.
33.
Those two numbers, 3700 and 3360. Okay. So go back over.
Okay, and then so the 3700 would be 1.4. Okay, I have lots because I have like over 4 ounces of it for that.
So a safety thing, yeah, put that one in too, just because if we're wrong and it's really only that many yards per pound, you want to make sure you still have enough.
Okay, yeah, no, I definitely should still have enough because I'm going to weigh it again, but I'm pretty sure I have over 4 ounces of this one.
Yeah, so you are in good shape.
Yeah.
All right.
Now so the only other one is for the weft.
Right, so that's coming in the next calculator.
Okay, should I get the weight per pound for it now or
Sure, yeah, since you're there. Shoot, I'm trying to remember what that other thing I was going to tell you when we looked back at.
336.
Oh, it's how I wear mascara.
Okay, got it. Okay.
All right.
Sorry, the thing when sharing keeps dropping down over the top of my screen.
Right.
Go up to the top to switch tabs.
Yeah.
So is there anything else on this one?
Scroll down, and I don't think there's any more like adjustments there. Do you have any further questions here? I'm sure there's lots of questions over there in the question and answer thing, and I will answer them when I can, but.
No, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing was just making sure I knew how to make sure I had enough of that one that was the smallest.
Right. Perfect. Okay.
Yep. The next one is this guy.
All righty.
This is the part where I actually have to decide really how wide I do want it to be able to calculate.
Exactly.
Okay. So.
And you'll have the opportunity to slide that thing around and see, again, how wide you can make it with the resources you have.
Right. Okay. So does it make sense to put the stuff down here first?
Sure.
So that's the yards per pound. And I have, come on, scale, turn back on. Okay, I have 3.7.
Okay. Now, but go up a little bit, a bit there. So notice that woven length of scarf, that is 76 inches. That is for just the scarf itself. Okay. So here's the thing. If when you're sampling, and we'll talk about this more next week in the what are you going to sample thing. If you have a very limited amount of the stuff you want to use for the actual scarf weft, you can sample the color with some other yarn that is the same color. If you happen to have, an 8-4 unmercerized cotton in that same navy blue.
Okay.
You test whether you were happy with the color of the weft with that stuff.
Okay.
But it's not going to tell you if you're happy with the beat and the
Right.
set. But you have that gold 8-2
Yes.
tencel, and you could weave a little sample with the gold tencel to test the beat, right?
Okay.
And then you might only need to weave like an inch or two with the actual precious weft yarn to confirm that this in the right size and the beat and the set that you're happy with the combination.
Okay.
But
So in that case, if I turn this to like say 80, that would be good.
If you put it at 80, that would cover both 4 inches of sampling and 76 inches of scarf. And if it turned out that you had to use 10 inches of it for sampling, well, then you'll only have 70 inches for the scarf, but maybe that's still an okay scarf.
Okay. And if I look, so 3.7 was how much? So if it's saying that it needs almost 3 ounces for this much, then I'm good. I should be fine.
You should be fine. You can increase the size of your sample, or you can increase the width of your warp.
If I increase the width of my warp to there, I'm pushing it now.
Yeah.
So 10 it is.
Well, or 11. What happens if you go with 11? Or, yeah.
That's not bad.
It's not bad. It does not give you much for sampling.
No.
Put in the, say, 16 inches for sampling and the 76 for your scarf.
So 92?
Sure. Okay, so how much do you need there?
Almost exactly what I got.
Okay. Well, will you be heartbroken if you can only weave 74 inches of your scarf instead of 76?
No.
Well then, there is a scrolly uppy 11 inches width of scarf, and that number, that weft required, that includes an extra 15% for weft wise take up.
Okay, and that's one of the things I was going to ask is with these synthetics and cellulose-based fibers, what is a reasonable assumption for take up in the like width-wise take up?
It's going to depend on which tie-up you choose.
Okay.
And it's going to depend on what set you've chosen. You will have less width-wise take-up the closer your set is.
Okay.
Because there won't be space for the yarns to smush together as much.
Okay.
So that 15% is probably over generous.
Okay.
Except that, I mean, you have take-up, dimensional loss weft-wise comes both from take up on the loom and then also from shrinkage and stuff in the wash. So overall, the 15% is not a bad estimate, but it's not going to come from the weaving process. It's not going to, some of that is not going to come from the weaving. It's going to come from the washing. So that 15% is going to probably overcompensate. So I think you'll be safe at your 11 inches wide and your 16-inch sample.
Okay, and I'm thinking I probably don't want to sample the whole thing with this anyway. I'll make sure that it works, and then I want to try out some of the other yarns that I didn't end up using, but I thought maybe they would look okay and see what they look like.
Right. Okay, so we have confirmed that you have, we hope, we think, enough, there's Tien, ta-da, enough of your weft. That is good news. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is all the calculators. That is figuring out a good set.
Mm-hmm.
It's choosing your colors. It's making sure your yarns are going to play nicely together.
Yep.
I think we covered, that is a lot. We put a lot into week 1, Tien. Go us! Huh. Do you, high five! Out both sides and down to Kate too. Any outstanding questions from you, Kate?
No, because I think the other questions that I have are probably the ones that are coming up in the next one around the color order and the best way to do that and that kind of stuff. So I'll play around with stuff that looks pretty and then throw it out I actually get told how it's supposed to work.
Right, right. Tien, anything you want to make sure to mention? Any live questions you needed to answer before we went? I haven't had a chance to look at the questions for a little while.
No, you've got 29 open questions, but I think we'd better answer them.
Yes.
I
Let
think
me
we better
see.
record some answers and post them.
Yeah,
Along
I'll
with the
either just type the answers or we can record them. But we'll make sure, folks, all those open, now there's 31. If you asked a question, you'll get an answer, even if it doesn't happen during this live event. It'll be included in the online classroom.
Yes.
And we also have, I mean, we can see from the records who asked the question too, so we can track you down.
All righty. Thank you very much, everyone.
Just a quick preview of what's going to happen next week. Well, first we should say we have the live Q&A, which is for all these outstanding questions and whatever comes up as you guys work through the lessons. That is going to happen on Wednesday evening, and you can email those questions with photos to questions@warpandweave.com, or you can post them into the discussion boards right in the online classroom, and you can put pictures there too, or you can post them. We will put a thread in the Facebook group, if you're on Facebook, where you can post questions and photos if you want. But we're only, for the online Q&A or the live Q&A, we're only going to look at the ones that are on that particular post in Facebook, rather than trying to dig through all of the questions all over the group, because it's very busy. And then week 2, just as a real brief look ahead, that's where Tien is going to talk about color placement, as she mentioned, and I'm going to talk about the actual execution of winding these mixed yarns together into a warp and getting it onto the loom.
Yep.
Okay.
All righty.
All right. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Sandra.
Yep.
Thank you,
And
Kate.
see you on
Bye,
Wednesday.
everybody.